US President Donald Trump has made his case for attacking Iran in his first nationwide address more than a month into the war, insisting the United States was very close to victory. Now, in the roughly 20-minute speech from the White House, Trump said that US military objectives in Iran were nearing completion, but said that they would continue hitting targets in the Islamic Republic over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Listen to this.
We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing. Regime change was not our goal. We never said regime change, but regime change has occurred because of all of their original leaders' death. They're all dead. American involvement in World War I lasted 1 year, 7 months, and 5 days. World War II lasted for 3 years, 8 months, and 25 days. The Korean War lasted for 3 years, 1 month, and 2 days. The Vietnam War lasted for 19 years, 5 months, and 29 days. Iraq went on for 8 years, 8 months, and 28 days. We are in this military operation, so powerful, so brilliant, against one of the most powerful countries for 32 days. And the country has been eviscerated and essentially is really no longer a threat. Over the Strait will open up naturally. It'll just open up naturally. They're going to want to be able to sell oil because that's all they have to try and rebuild. It will resume the flowing, and the gas prices will rapidly come back down. Stock prices will rapidly go back up. They haven't come down very much, frankly.
While Trump's speech comes as recent polling shows his overall approval rating slipping below 40%. Disapprovals are climbing above the mid-50s, with the war itself deeply unpopular with segments of his own Republican Party. Trump administration voiced strong support for him, but with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio calling the speech powerful, Rubio stated that the president was clear about U.S. objectives in Iran. In a post on social media platform X, he outlined these objectives and said the president's leadership sends a strong message to the world, which is that the U.S. will defend its people, protect its interests, and uphold peace through strength. Trump's Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, wrote, "Back to Stone Age" on social media, and this was soon after Trump's speech. However, Senate Minority Leader, he reacted to the U.S. President's speech with a question. Has there ever been a more rambling, disjointed and pathetic presidential war speech? He said Trump's action in Iran will be considered one of the greatest policy blunders in the history of the United States, failing to articulate objectives, alienating allies, and ignoring the kitchen table problems that Americans are facing. He also said that Trump was completely unfit to be commander-in-chief. And to discuss more, we are being joined from Washington, D.C. by Ms. Asha Castleberry. She's a U.S. national security and foreign policy expert. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast, Ms. Castleberry. And of course, President Trump, who's now facing a war-weary American public and sliding poll numbers, said the U.S. had destroyed Iran's Navy and Air Force and crippled its ballistic missile and nuclear program. And it is also said that it would continue to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks, while contested claims of diplomacy are also emerging. How should we read into this? Is this perhaps a new tentative timeline for the conflict that we're seeing in West Asia, according to you?
Well, looking at the defense versus diplomacy efforts, it's evident that the likelihood of defense to outperform the diplomacy efforts is very high. Where we're seeing in terms of the next 2 to 3 weeks, if the United States continues to attack like what was mentioned from the President of the United States, I think we'll see that will likely happen, and which could possibly get into an escalatory situation. Versus looking at the diplomatic efforts, which remain somewhat slow. I mean, we're seeing some developments with regards to Pakistan playing a part in some sort of negotiations, but as long as this war continues and we're seeing a tight grip or control situation coming from Iran, I think it's going to definitely create a lot of costs for the United States, especially if our coalition, a potential coalition, is not in place, or our allies and partners contribute more to help address the Strait of Hormuz. But we'll see.
Of course, and that being said, Trump has claimed that US no longer requires oil from West Asia, and he has urged countries relying on oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz to take responsibility and take over the waterway. Now, which he said should open up naturally. Now, I'm just curious to know your perspective on this. Do you think it is perhaps in some ways an attempt to offload the burden onto other countries, which has, of course, opened up as an unintended consequence of the war?
Well, the United States has been quite disappointed with the lack of contributions from our allies and partners. So I'm not surprised that that statement was made. I think that statement was made just to encourage him to contribute more, which he's not satisfied with right now. And then prior to the those remarks, or before tonight's speech, we saw some comments made that the administration is looking at pulling the United States out of NATO, and then there was also some disappointments involved in not being able to use Spain's military base or airspace. So I think that what we're seeing is that the leadership has been quite disgruntled with the lack of contributions coming from Europe, and I think that's why those comments were made about, if you want to utilize the Strait of Hormuz, just go ahead and just take the oil, and besides, we're producing our own oil.
Right, and President Trump has insisted that US is nearing victory in the war, and he has also claimed that regime change has occurred, and now what Washington is dealing with are less radicalized leaders than their predecessors. But from what we're understanding, even though Iran's military capabilities are far less diminished, they are still not ready to back down. We're seeing attacks which are taking place every day, and in fact, just a few hours after Trump made that speech, they also took place. Now, how do you think Iran is going to, respond to this particular this tentative time frame that has also come up, but also the statements that are surfacing now?
Well, what we may see is the continuation of a lack of alignment and slow progression with regards to diplomatic efforts. We do have actually new leadership in place as a result of this war, which I think the United States is going to have a harder time to negotiate with. So I believe that Iran's true intent is to prolong this war as much as possible, as a way to continue growing out those costs that are associated with the war, mainly as far as controlling, restricting the Strait of Hormuz, making as much money as possible, or being able to become more lucrative as a result of it, but also ensuring that the United States really experiences a growing number of economic and security costs as a result of this war.
Absolutely, and of course we'll have to wait and see how the situation develops from here. But for now, thank you so much for joining us in the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us.
Yes, thank you.